I'm coming at you guys with a video on Easter Island. It's actually been 3 years since I'd made a video on this site. I just want to put out the main topic, the main explanation on this site. In fact, the video was actually for my Giants playlist. Expand anything on that. I'm just going to put out my main point, which is that this site, the Easter Island statues there that they say were carved out of the rock, that the main explanation what I've put out is that they were built out of wood, either logs carved out of full tree trunks, right, or built, well, in fact there's a few different types, so some of them were in fact built in sections, okay, pieces of wood and just general joinery, and then there's a few that were just carved out of actual tree trunks themselves, whether they were done by the same civilization, maybe, but there are a few different types. Well, there's about 6 or 7 different types, okay, and various sizes, but that's what I'm going to prove, is that there were, well, let's say 80% of them is actually the result of wood going through pyroclastic flows and flooding, and that's why it looks like it does today. We're not looking at a site where, because the story is that the reason why there's no trees on the island today is because they cut all the trees down to then transport the statues that are supposedly carved out of rock. Yeah. So they cut all the trees down to then transport these statues into position, right? So the main part of this video is proving to you 100% and no doubt that most of them, that's most, are actually dropping out of the rock, the mountain, the cliff sides as it erodes. Well, they erode out of the mountain today, okay, so in rain and what have you, they literally erode out themselves. Now, why they're all just smashed into a pile in this, at the side of this volcano, well, there's obvious explanations, a tsunami, a volcanic event, who knows, right? But there's no doubt that they just fall out themselves. Now, there are a few different types. Some of them do look like they've been carved, okay, the smaller ones. So I've already laid out my point on this. I could have put this in my final jigsaw playlist, but not exactly. Now, what these red things are that they place on the head, again, there's 7 different types of these things. Yeah, these things have been studied here for quite some time, so I'm pretty sure that over a good few hundred years they would have been knocked down. So when these were done, I mean, even these ones that I'm showing here, these are from a different period, yeah, but they haven't got the red stuff on the head. Now, you can actually stand them up just in simple ways. Now, but you wouldn't be able to drag them around, okay, and certainly with primitive methods you wouldn't, but you could stand them up just by piling rocks up. Now, there are apparently some in the ocean, but I don't fully believe everything that I see. Somebody could have dropped these off very easily. Some of the images don't even seem to add up. The old, well, it's like someone's removed some of the coral off them, right, at some point. That, I suppose somebody could have done that just to clean them up and maybe take them away. People that like to preserve sea life wouldn't allow that. But again, I just don't believe everything that I see, okay? But it wouldn't surprise me if there are some in the ocean. Now, the main thing that I pointed out in the video from 3 years ago is because they make out that they were carving it out of the hillside, okay? Now, what I said in that video is, if you can imagine like a 75-ton tank, which is about the largest that we've got, right? So you're carving around it, and then you've got to drag that down the hill with just a few humans that weigh just a couple of stone. Yeah, well, it's not going to happen. And the image that I'm showing here is an experiment that they tried to prove. Young archaeologists to indoctrinate them to prove that it could be done. Now, they only put a few, I don't know, about 3 tons of stone in the bottom of a plastic mould, so it would actually roll around, and they still couldn't do it. They had to move it with a crane, yeah, but yet they still went on with the narrative that somehow they were carving these statues, right, first, and then transporting them, when you wouldn't carve them first, you would carve them afterwards, yeah, because if you were carving the neck and everything first and they fell over, they would break, so then you would just waste hundreds worth of hours, of man hours, carving this stuff to risk destroying them. None of it adds up, alright?
I used to have 2 images of this site close up, and these things are actually massive. None of these are burial mounds. They were once structures which have since collapsed and, you know, got buried over. I do find it interesting how they are in the same shape as this, like that's China, Mexico, Egypt, and constellation of Orion. These are the different types of moai, yeah, different sizes. That's actually some even bigger than this. But these are the ones that I'm saying were actually alive and living and walking around. They have been turned to ash in pyroclastic floors, and no different to what happened at Pompeii and other areas. But just look at the colour of this. And you can go on the internet and find images of what petrified wood looks like, or wood that's been in pyroclastic floors. Because as this thing's fallen down, part of the face has actually come away. This thing has been built in sections, guys, and this next one shows you exactly how it's built. You know, like the face, this has been carved out like that. Then they fit the nose into a slot. Can you see like a square hole there? Yeah. You know, the nose is connected into there. Then the face is made, yeah, and it connects into that square hole there, and is locked into shape, right? Probably shaped like a V, you know, so it locks into shape, so you have to hammer it in. You see this line down here? This whole thing is built in sections. There's probably about 3 or 4 different pieces just to the head, and then the rest of the body is probably, you know, is built in sections. There is no carving away from any rock and carrying this stuff around. It's literally built on site. These things are just literally falling free from this pyroclastic floor which encased all this stuff. Yeah, I'm going to move in there now. So this is the head of that one that I just showed you, and you can see how big it is. But mainstream archaeology, obviously, they try and tell you that this thing was knocked out of here, but I can tell you that all that's happened here is that this, as this thing started to dry out, it fell free from this ash. And it wasn't too long ago, because it's landed on the soil, unless there's a load more under this stuff. But all these things are just literally falling out of all this material. They fall out naturally, and then they roll down the hill and get embedded in the ground. You know, when that first happened, the earlier ones maybe turned upright and sank in the mud, and the ones that have been falling out in more recent times, they just roll down and stay laid down. But this is another one, to me, that actually may have been living. This thing is massive. What these things were, look, I don't know. I mean, they could have been part of their structure, yeah. You know, they were building beams and God knows what, but they were building these things to imitate themselves. It's just a strange mix. It's a very, very strange mix. It's hard to put your finger on. I just know for a fact that these things are falling out of this ash. That is petrified wood. Look at it. That looks like it's literally wearing a mask there. It's actually got its arms outstretched. This thing behind it, this looks like it was real to me. Look at this. There's 4 different ones in here, and they're all joined to each other via hard ash. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's very, very confusing. All I know is that there's one on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other, and on top of the other, all the way down. And it just, look, there's one there, there's one there, there's one there, there's one there. The weight of them just break free, and it rains, and they just roll down the hill, right? This is, again, is the image that made them think that these things were carved from here, but this will have been eroded naturally by water, and then native peoples of the past will have hammered away a little bit, but they weren't able to move it. That's why it stayed where it was.
Can I just say as well, now I don't know if these longer pieces used to be part of a causeway, but they've got them down as boat, parts of a boat, right? I can see it. I've got nothing against it, it's just that they're now some type of rock, okay? But the point is that you wouldn't be using pieces of stone, something heavy like this for one thing, right? When building boats, would you? Right, so it's obviously turned into this sense, and why they've not even thought about that is beyond me, really.